Everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Point Alliance's Solutions for Success. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are joined by Kevin Doi, one of our Microsoft Azure architects, who's going to share some insight with us today about the Microsoft Azure platform. What is it? What are the different components to it? What can you do on Microsoft Azure? How do you deploy applications to Microsoft Azure? So he will be giving us a full run through and taking any questions at the end of the presentation that you may have, but hopefully again this will give you a little more information for those that are not using Microsoft Cloud yet, whether it's to deploy production applications or even just use it for UAT and testing, so to spin up your applications on the cloud quickly and easily, to do some testing before then deploying them either on-premise or to the cloud. So without further ado, I will turn this session over to Kevin Doi.
All right, so I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about Azure Deployment. First off, we'll give a quick overview on Point Alliance. So Point Alliance is based in Toronto. We're founded in 2002. We specialize in innovative web collaborative and web solutions. Partnered with many industry leaders, also a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We have in-depth industry knowledge, including work with not-for-profit associations, media, healthcare, education, financial services, property management, just to name a few. So as Jonathan said, I am a solution architect here at Point Alliance. I've been here for about 6 years, and I'm going to walk you through a high-level overview of Azure. There's a lot of components to Azure, so again, with limited time, we'll just kind of walk through basically setting up a very simple website, as well as, if we have time, we'll go ahead and do a SQL deployment as well, and then integrating that into Visual Studio. So a quick overview of Azure. What Azure is, it's basically a set of cloud services. So these products and services that once took hours to install can now take minutes to install at the click of a button in Azure. So if you think about setting up like a SQL install, that install itself may have taken 20 minutes or so, and you may have had to be present or write scripts to basically install that. So that can happen in the cloud automatically. These services would be accessible anywhere in the world. You can install them anywhere in the world. You can have them synced across multiple instances. You can also lock these down via firewall and NAT rules very easily through their web interface. There is also a command line interface in Azure as well, so you can also, if you're a fan of command line scripts, you can still work with those. The main draw towards Azure is the easy scaling to accommodate growing customer needs or declining customer needs as well. Scaling an application up and down based on demand is very easy. It can be automatically scheduled if a site, for instance, has traffic coming in, say at 6 p.m. It's after work or something like that, is its main draw for 3 hours. You could actually scale up the app services for those 3 hours and then scale it back automatically after that traffic has dropped down to keep your costs minimized. So I've talked about app services a little bit here. So just jumping into what app services is. It's also known as web apps, and it basically just allows you to host web applications in the language of your choice. So web applications, these could also be mobile application backends in the language of your choice. So app services allows you to host .NET frameworks, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, Java, Python, and static HTML sites. It supports both Linux and Windows-based applications. So actually, when you create your app service plan, you would pick a Linux or a Windows-based setup. The cool thing about that is actually we can then deploy .NET Core as well. It does support .NET Core in the latest deployments of .NET Core. Since all of this is Microsoft-based, we do have deep integration with Visual Studio. So automatic deployments via any Git repo and Visual Studio team services. So any Git repo, that would be like GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. App services, again, easy horizontal and vertical scaling. So horizontal scaling would be scaling out horizontally. That would be adding more web servers, for instance. Vertical scaling would be scaling up, so adding more RAM, adding more CPU as necessary. Another thing would be continuous integration and deployment with Visual Studio Team Services and Git repos. Continuous integration and deployment would be basically as you check in code and do builds on your TFS server, for instance, you would continually be deploying those up into Azure. That may work if you have say a staging environment in Azure. We're not going to touch too much on that, again, just with time restrictions. Again, with app services, easy setup for IP restrictions, integration with Azure Active Directory. I've mentioned seamless integration with Visual Studio, and you pay only for the computing time that you use. This is the main draw towards moving services into the cloud. You don't have to pay that upfront hardware cost and not use it. Really, is that you can deploy in the cloud in a matter of minutes, as I'll show you, and only pay for the actual CPU cycles that you use. If you have a site that you don't know what kind of traffic you're going to get, you end up getting minimal traffic, you pay minimal cost. As that site gets more popular, you can scale it up vertically, scale it up horizontally, and pay as that site becomes more popular. So as I talked about cost here, this is the current cost. The app services pricing and tiers, they kind of change pretty frequently, but this is actually as of today. So app services does have a free tier and a development tier. The free tier gives you 60 minutes of CPU time per day. This is the one we're going to deploy today. It deploys into a shared infrastructure with 1 gig of memory. It's good for development, good for testing. The next one would be the S1 tier. And in the S tier, you have an S1, S2, S3. The S1 basic tier would be a 1-core CPU, 1.75 gigs, and these are usually billed per hour, right? So you got 0.1215 cents per hour is what that works out, which actually works out to about $87 a month. The P1 would be the next tier, and you have P2, P3. You can see these kind of move up, 1 core, 2 core, 3 core, and the memory kind of jumps up 3.5 gigs, 7 gigs, 14 gigs, and the price basically doubles at that, 175, 350, 700 a month. The P3 is a pretty heavy setup, and again, within each one of those, you have about 3 different tiers within each one, so should be able to accommodate any deployment that you're looking for. Going into the Azure SQL Server, again, this is a fully relational cloud database. If anybody has any experience with SQL Server, you'd be able to easily migrate any of your existing SQL Server databases to Azure. The good thing about this is you can use your existing SQL Server Management Studio, so SSMS, to connect to all of your cloud databases. So easy migration of your existing servers, and really your devs or your SQL database admins, they, if they prefer to work in SSMS locally from their desks, they aren't really going to notice any difference. All of these things, when you deploy into Azure as well, Azure gives you a lot of insights into how you can also optimize these. So when you deploy, like say SQL Server, you're going to get, as that database gets accessed, you're going to get some insights and optimization and recommendations from Azure on, what sort of indexes could be applied on certain tables based on how information is accessed. So those are nice to have things as well. And then the pricing model on SQL Server, again, there's two different ways that SQL Server is deployed. There's DTUs and vCore. So DTUs is a data transfer unit, which is a fixed set of resources assigned to a single database or an elastic database pool. An elastic database pool is basically kind of built out based on number of connections, where a single database is you have that full single database node. An elastic database pool, you may have 100 connections within the full pool, or 250 or 500, etc. So what a DTU is basically it's a bundled measure of storage, compute, and I/O resources expressed in DTU units. So the cheapest instance that Azure has is 5 DTU, which works out to about $17 a month for a single database, which would be the cheapest SQL Server price that you can get up there. When you move to vCore, these allow you to independently scale compute and storage resources. So the cheapest instance is 1 vCore, which actually works out to around $130 a month. So again, if you're working in a development instance, going with the free app service deployment and a 5 DTU SQL Server, you could get up there for around $17 a month and have, you know, a good development environment set up. So I've talked about deploying applications into Azure and the integration into Visual Studio. It's built right in, basically up from Visual Studio 2015, I believe. 2013 has it, but 2015 up, it's very nice. So I'm going to show it using 2017. So once your app service is set up, you can easily download your publish profile and import that into Visual Studio for publishing and continuous deployments. And I'm going to demo that for you. The other thing I'll walk through too is application insights, which allows you to view live stats of users accessing your site. It also allows you for a developer standpoint as well. So to view code exceptions, same with status codes, HTTP status codes, so your 200, 404, 500s, request information, processing times, how long a page takes to actually be rendered, your AJAX calls, how long they take to be rendered, and etc. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of information in there, and we can just touch on that on a high level. Adding this to your solution is very simple. It's integrated right into Visual Studio as well, and I'll demo that too. So creating an app service, so let's go ahead and demo it. I'm going to load up Visual Studio here, a new instance. And while that loads, I have the Azure portal loaded here. And you can see this is my dashboard. So I have some subscriptions in our Point Alliance account here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new app service plan. So under all resources, you can see I have an add button. And these are the most popular ones here. You can also create virtual machines in Azure as well, which are good if you just want full control of an actual server. Very easy to set up too. I'm going to create an app service plan, so I'm just going to type app service, hit enter. And there's my app service plan here. And create. So I need an app service plan name. I'm going to call this Point Alliance Demo. I'll create a new resource group. This will be Point Alliance Demo 1. Our subscriptions pay as you go. I'm going to create this as a Windows OS. I'll put it in Canada East. And then our pricing tier. So I touched on the pricing tiers. I'm going to go with our free pricing tier, 1 gig, 60 minutes a day of compute, which is enough for our demo today. And create. Now, once I hit create, you can see it's validating our info here. A pop-up pops up here saying the deployment's in process, and we get a notification right here. So this only takes about 30 seconds or so. While it's deploying, I can actually still do other things in the portal. So the next thing I'll want to do is create a web app within the app service plan. So I'm going to want to wait for this to actually finish. So there it is, done. So I'll go back to all resources. and I'm going to add, and I'm going to just type in web app. So there's our web app. And create. So we need a name for our web app, and you can see that it's actually going to give it an address at azurewebsites.net. I'm going to call this Point Alliance Demo. I'm going to use our existing resource group that I just created, it's Point Alliance Demo 1. I can give it a OS, Windows, Linux, and even Docker. Our app service plan is our free one that I just created. And I'm going to turn on Application Insight. So this will create an Application Insights resource as well at the same time. I'm going to place that in East US. Those are only located in the US region for some reason. Create. You can see that deployment is in process now. Now while that's happening, I have Visual Studio open. I'm going to create a new website here. So new project. Web, let's say it's an .NET web application. We'll stick with the regular .NET framework. I'll call this Point Alliance Demo. And we'll just create a blank MVC application. You can see it's just adding our jQuery, some other references based on the template. And there we go. So I should be able to run this and just get our start page. Our default Bootstrap start page. There we go. So this is good enough for our demo. What we'll do is we will deploy this to Azure, this website here. I'm going to stop that. So if we flip back to Azure, our deployment's likely done for our web app. It is. So I'm going to go to All Resources, and I'll look at our web app. We have our Point Alliance Demo, App Service Plan. So everything lives within the App Service Plan. Then we have our app service right here, our Point Alliance Demo, also known as the web app. So we can click on that. Now you can see we have an overview here. So you can see we have a URL already, pointalliancedemo.azurewebsites.net. And open that in a new tab. And you can see we get a nice page saying our service is up and running. Right now, that's all that's up there. We have it shows what tier we're on. We have an FTP deployment username, host name, server, all that stuff, and some overview on the stats. 500 errors, how much data we're sending in and out, request and average response time. We could add some custom domains to this if we wanted to when we're ready to go. SSL. Here's our scale up when we want to scale up our plan. So we could put it up to D1, B1, some of the more advanced ones. We could scale out. We can't do that with our free plan. And quite a lot of other things as well, which we just don't have the time to go through each one. But what I'm interested in is going back to the overview and grabbing the publish profile. So you can see get publish profile. So this downloads a file here. And now if I flip back to Visual Studio, and I right click on my project and I go to publish. In here, I have the option to import a profile. And click publish and then go to my downloads. And this is the latest one, Point Alliance Demo. And you can see it imports all our username, our password, the site URL, and everything. We could set up our continuous delivery here. For us to do that, this needs to be bound to some kind of source control. But in the meantime, I could publish, which it's actually doing right away. And you can see once it's done, it actually loads up our new website, pointalliancedemo.azurewebsites.net. And then once this compiles, we'll see our fancy bootstrapped MVC template. There we go. So this is now living in the cloud. If we flip back to our portal, we go back to our overview, and you can see we have some requests. We've got 3.01 kilobytes in, and we've sent 2.7 kilobytes out. So it's a pretty lightweight page. Average response time 33 milliseconds, not too shabby, and 2 requests, probably one for the HTML page and one for the style sheet in that case. So the next thing we can do is actually install application insights. So again, integrated tightly into Visual Studio, we can just right-click on the project and application insights and configure. So first thing, it looks like I'm using an old version, so we can update that. It's going to install some references for us in the project. That's done. And we can start our free version. I'm going to flip to our Point Alliance account. Subscriptions pay as you go. Here's our resource pool, Point Alliance Demo. And you can see we're using the free base monthly, which gives us 1 gig of application insight data per month at additional $2.30 per gigabyte. Keeps the data for 90 days. We will register for that one. And that's it. We could also enable trace collection. That basically we'll just add some NuGet packages as well. We'll just keep it as is here. Configuring, it's at 80%. Oh, it's actually configured. Good stuff. So now we can, if we deploy here, we'll publish again. Now on each publish, you'll actually see live data from your application via application insights here. Live data from our app, 0 requests, 0 failures. Just as a quick little plug-in here in Visual Studio. Now it's not going to show, see there's our request, us hitting the page right there. So this is actually pretty neat. We could see more live telemetry just by going back into the portal here, and under our all resources, we'll have an application insights right here, Point Alliance Demo. You can see we have 1 server. Here's an overview of our timeline, total requests, kind of breaks it up by time. Our longer request would probably be the compile time, the first request. We can look at our live stream for each server and actually get a kind of overview of what's going on. So we see CPU processing. Just going to refresh the page a few times here. It's actually pretty quick. You can see those incoming requests when I hit F5. Right there. Request duration, no failures. And the CPU jump up just a little bit to handle those incoming requests. And it looks like we have just a little bit of time, so I'll actually show you just deploying a SQL Server as well. So under all resources, so a SQL Server, basically you need to add a SQL Server and then a database as 2 different items. So first we will add a SQL Server. So server name, Point Alliance Demo. You can see it gives this a public address as well, pointalliancedemo.database.windows.net. You need to give it a login, so Point Alliance Demo, and a secret password. We'll use an existing resource group, our Point Alliance demo, and create. And once that is done, we can come back in here and create our SQL Server database. Our database name, I'll go Point Alliance demo, stay consistent. Resource group, Point Alliance demo. We will create a blank database, select the server. Now this is where we actually need to wait on our server to be completed. Pricing tier, so I talked about the different pricing tiers that are available here. And again, we just need to wait for our server. In the meantime, I don't want to actually pick, oh, there we go, okay. Let's just start it over so it actually picks up our new server. Add SQL Server database. Create. All right, Point Alliance demo. There we go. Right, so this is the minimum DTU right here. We'll pick basic, so 5 is our minimum. Works out to actually $668 per month. So we'll create this and then kill it, and it'll probably cost about 10 cents for our demo. Now, once that's done, it'll actually give us a connection string, which we would then be able to go into our web solution in Visual Studio and connect directly. Say we could add an entity framework and connect directly to it. I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is actually come in here and connect via SQL Server. I'll create a new instance of SQL Server, Management Studio. I'm running 2016, and I'll just wait to get the connection string here. So it took about 2 or 3 minutes to set up the server. The database probably takes about the same amount of time. Again, 2 or 3 clicks. It's a lot faster than doing it locally. Well, I'm not sure. The database itself may be a little bit slower, but the setting up the server is definitely a lot quicker than setting it up locally. There we go. Database is done. Now I can go back to my resource list, pick my SQL Server database right here. Now I can get my connection string. There we go. There's our connection string right there. So it actually gives me a connection string in different formats. So ADO.NET, this is the one I would actually use for Entity Framework, JDBC for Java, ODBC for Access, PHP as well. I can get this basically here. Point Alliance demo is my database, and then I created my user ID and password. So you can see the Point Alliance demo.database.windows.net is the server. I can just paste that in here, SQL Server authentication, and now with the integration into SQL Server, it's actually going to ask me to sign into my Azure account to confirm that we are indeed the owner. That way, not every single person has access to this account. Since the database is technically publicly out there. There we go. And then you can see here too, it's actually going to detect my IP and I can add my IP as a valid IP for other people, say, within my office here, to go ahead and connect to this database. And there we go. There's our database in the cloud. And here's our Point Alliance demo database. Right now, no tables other than the system tables in there. And we could go ahead and start using that. And that's it. So within, I think that was about 20 minutes, I've deployed a web application with application insights and a SQL Server into Azure. And that's it. So thank you for your time.